The night was cold, and a thick mist rolled over the deserted road as Jake, Emma, and Leo approached the looming silhouette of Green Manor. The old mansion stood at the edge of town, its broken windows like empty eyes staring into the darkness. A rusty iron gate separated them from the front yard, its hinges creaking as Jake pushed it open. "Are we really doing this?" Leo asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma adjusted her backpack and nodded. "Of course we are. We came all this way."
"Didn't we?" Jake grinned. "Come on, guys."
"It's just an old house. What's the worst that could happen?" The three stepped onto the overgrown path leading to the front porch. The ground was uneven, littered with fallen leaves and broken twigs. The air smelled of damp wood and decay. As they approached the towering wooden doors, a sudden gust of wind howled through the trees, making Leo shudder. "I heard this place has been abandoned for over 50 years, Emma said. "People say it used to belong to a wealthy family, but one night they all just vanished." Leo scoffed, but his fingers fidgeted with his jacket zipper. "Vanished? More like they moved away." Jake reached for the brass door handle and gave it a firm push. To his surprise, the door creaked open without resistance. The inside was pitch black, the air thick with dust and silence. "Looks like someone forgot to lock up," Jake joked, stepping inside. Emma switched on her flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. The grand foyer stretched before them, lined with tall wooden columns and faded wallpaper peeling from the walls. A grand staircase led to the second floor, its wooden steps groaning under the weight of time. Leo hesitated at the threshold. "Are we sure this is a good idea?" Emma rolled her eyes. "If you're scared, you can wait outside." Jake smirked and nudged Leo playfully. "Come on, man. Where's your sense of adventure?" Reluctantly, Leo stepped inside and the door groaned as it swung shut behind him. The sound echoed through the empty halls, sending a chill down his spine. They moved further into the house, their footsteps muffled by a thick layer of dust. Cobwebs clung to the chandeliers and old paintings lined the walls, their subjects' faces barely visible under years of grime. Suddenly, Emma's flashlight flickered. "That's weird," she muttered, tapping it. At that exact moment, a faint sound echoed from upstairs, a slow, deliberate thud. The three of them froze. Leo swallowed hard. "Okay, that was definitely something." Jake turned his flashlight toward the staircase. "Probably just the wind," he said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Emma took a step closer to the base of the stairs. "Or maybe we're not as alone as we thought." A nervous silence hung in the air. Then, from the wall to their right, something caught Emma's eye, a small, yellowed piece of paper pinned just beneath an old portrait. The edges were curled, the ink faded, but the words were still legible. She reached out and pulled it free, reading aloud. "Find the key under the old clock." The three exchanged glances. Jake's grin returned. "Looks like we've got our first clue." Emma held the note between her fingers. the faded ink barely visible under the dim glow of her flashlight. The message was simple, yet it sent a shiver down her spine. Find the key under the old clock. What key? Leo asked, shifting nervously. And what clock? Jake scanned the room, his eyes settling on the far end of the grand foyer. Against the wall stood a towering grandfather clock, its wooden frame coated in dust. The pendulum inside was still frozen in time. There, Jake said, nodding toward it. That has to be the one. Emma hesitated before leading the way, her shoes making soft imprints in the thick layer of dust covering the marble floor. The closer they got, the more details became clear, the intricate carvings on the clock's surface, the faded gold hand stuck at exactly 12:03. Leo crossed his arms. All right, we found the clock. Now what? Jake knelt down, running his hand along the base of the structure. His fingers brushed against something small and solid. Got it. He pulled out a rusted key, its metal corroded with age. Holding it up to the light, he turned it in his hand, inspecting its ornate design. Looks old. Emma leaned in. But what does it open? Leo took a step back, glancing around the dark room. Maybe we shouldn't find out. Before Jake could reply, a deep echoing chime rang out. The grandfather clock, which had been silent for decades, suddenly came to life, its bells tolling loudly. The sound reverberated through the empty halls, making Leo jump. That's not normal, Emma said, gripping her flashlight tighter. Jake quickly stepped away from the clock, stuffing the key into his pocket. The echoes of the chimes slowly faded, leaving the house eerily silent once more. Emma exhaled. Okay. That was weird. Leo was already backing toward the door. Maybe it's a sign, like, a warning? Jake rolled his eyes. Or maybe the clock is just broken. Still, even he couldn't ignore the way his pulse had quickened. There was something undeniably unsettling about the way the clock had chosen that moment to ring. Emma turned the note over in her hands. Who do you think wrote this? If the house has been abandoned for 50 years, how is this paper not covered in dust? Jake shrugged. Maybe someone else has been here recently. Leo shook his head. I don't like this. What if we're messing with something we shouldn't? Emma gave him a teasing smile. What happened to just moving away? Thought you didn't believe in ghost stories. Leo frowned but didn't answer. Jake pulled the key back out and turned it between his fingers. Well, there's only one way to find out what this opens. Emma sighed but nodded. Let's look around. The three spread out across the foyer, checking the walls, furniture, and doors. Most of them were locked or stuck, their handles rusted in place. The only area they hadn't explored yet was a small hallway leading to a set of double doors at the back of the house. Emma reached them first. She pressed her hand against the worn wood and gave it a push. It didn't budge, locked. Jake stepped beside her and held up the key. Only one way to know if this is the right door. Leo sighed. I hate this plan. Jake ignored him. Sliding the key into the lock, it fit perfectly. With a slow click, the mechanism turned. He took a deep breath and pushed the doors open. Beyond them lay a dimly lit room filled with towering bookshelves and dust-covered furniture. The scent of old paper and mildew filled the air. A massive chandelier, coated in cobwebs, hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly as if disturbed by an unseen breeze. Emma stepped forward cautiously. "It's a library," Jake grinned. "Now this is interesting." Leo stayed in the doorway. "Can we please stop before we find something we regret?" Emma ignored him, her eyes scanning the rows of books. Then something caught her attention. On a small wooden table in the center of the room sat an old, leather-bound book. Unlike everything else, it wasn't covered in dust. Jake noticed it too. "That doesn't belong here." Emma hesitated before reaching out and flipping it open. A small envelope slid from between the pages, landing softly on the table. Leo groaned. "Of course there's another note." Emma picked it up and carefully unfolded the paper inside. Her voice was barely a whisper as she read the words aloud. "Read between the lines." A chill ran through all three of them. Jake smirked, though his fingers twitched slightly. "Looks like our mystery isn't over yet." Emma stared at the words on the note. "Read between the lines." The phrase seemed simple, but there was an unsettling weight to it. She turned the paper over, but there was nothing else, no signature, no markings, just those four cryptic words. Jake leaned over her shoulder. "What does it mean?" Leo groaned. "It means we should leave right now." Emma ignored him, her gaze shifting back to the old book on the table. She flipped through the pages, scanning for anything unusual. The text was dense, written in old-fashioned cursive, but nothing stood out. "Maybe it's a code," Jake suggested, picking up the book. He held it under his flashlight, tilting the pages, as if looking for invisible ink, or maybe. He ran his fingers along the paper, feeling for texture differences. "No hidden messages?" Emma frowned. "Wait." She took the book back and narrowed her eyes. "Look at this." She flipped to a specific page where some words seemed slightly darker than the rest, almost as if they had been pressed harder into the paper. She traced her finger along the lines, reading them aloud. "Look under the floorboard." Leo stepped back. "Nope, absolutely not." Jake grinned. "This is awesome." Emma looked down at the floor. The library's wooden planks were old and uneven, some warped from time. If something was hidden beneath them, it had been there for decades. "How do we know which board?" she asked. Jake thought for a moment, then glanced back at the book. "Maybe it's a specific spot. Let's check near the table." They knelt down, running their hands across the wooden surface, knocking gently to listen for a hollow sound. After a few tries, Emma's fingers pressed against a slightly looser plank. "This one," she whispered. Leo groaned. "Of course it is." Jake wedged his fingers under the edge of the board and pulled. At first, it wouldn't budge, but after a bit of force, the wood creaked and lifted, revealing a small, dust-covered compartment beneath. Inside, nestled in the darkness, was a small metal box. It was old, its surface rusted, but the latch was still intact. Jake lifted it out carefully. "What do you think is inside?" Emma exhaled. "Only one way to find out." Leo rubbed his temples. "We could just not open it. That's an option." But Jake was already undoing the latch. With a soft click, the lid opened. Inside was a faded black and white photograph, yellowed at the edges. It showed a family, a man, a woman, and a young girl standing in front of Green Manor. They looked happy, their arms around each other, as if posing for a special occasion. Underneath the photo was another note, written in the same delicate handwriting as the others. "The past holds the truth." Emma traced the words with her fingers. "Who are they?" Jake studied the faces. Maybe the original owners of the house? Leo swallowed hard. "Didn't you say they vanished?" The three of them exchanged uneasy glances. The photograph was old. The ink on the note faded. Whoever had left these messages had done so a long time ago. But if the house had been abandoned for 50 years, how were these clues still so perfectly placed? Emma turned the photo over, hoping for more information. In neat cursive, a date was written, October 12, 1953. Jake's expression darkened. That was the night they disappeared. A heavy silence settled over them. The air in the library suddenly felt colder, heavier, as if the house itself was listening. Then, thud, the sound came from upstairs. A slow, deliberate noise, like footsteps. Leo's face went pale. "Okay, we're leaving. Right now." Emma shivered but held her ground. "Someone else is here." Jake tightened his grip on the metal box. "Or something." Another thud echoed through the house. The sound was closer this time. Emma forced herself to breathe. "We need to find out what happened to this family." Leo shook his head violently. No, we don't. We need to get out of here before we end up as the next mystery people talk about." Jake looked back at the note. The past holds the truth. His mind raced. What was this house trying to tell them? Emma grabbed his arm. "Jake." He looked up. "The doors," she whispered. Jake turned, and his stomach dropped. The double doors to the library, the ones they had left wide open, were now closed, and they hadn't been the ones to close them. For a long moment, none of them moved. The heavy double doors stood shut, their wooden frames casting long shadows in the dim light. The air in the library felt different, thicker, charged with something unseen. Leo was the first to react. He rushed toward the doors and grabbed the handles, yanking hard. No, this isn't happening." The doors didn't budge. Jake joined him, pulling with all his strength. "Nothing. We're locked in," Emma whispered, gripping the metal box tighter. Leo turned, his breathing uneven. "This is bad. This is really, really bad." Jake took a step back, pressing his hands against his head. "Okay, let's not freak out. Maybe the doors are just jammed." Leo shot him a panicked look. Doors don't just close by themselves. Emma forced herself to stay calm, scanning the room. There had to be another way out. A hidden passage, a key, something. Her eyes landed on the bookshelves. Wait, what if the answer is in here? Jake frowned. You think the bookshelves are hiding something? Emma nodded, thinking back to the note. The past holds the truth. This house has been leading us somewhere, she continued. The clock, the key, the note under the floorboard. Maybe the next clue is here. Leo let out a shaky breath. Or maybe we're just being played with. Emma ignored him and ran her fingers along the spines of the books, searching for anything unusual. Most were covered in dust, their titles barely legible, but then she stopped. One of the books was different. Unlike the others, its leather cover wasn't covered in dust. The spine read, Green Manor, a family history. Emma pulled it from the shelf. The moment she did, a faint click echoed through the room. Jake turned sharply. Did you hear that? Before Emma could respond, the bookshelf moved. A hidden door, seamlessly built into the wall, creaked open an inch, revealing a dark passageway beyond. Leo took a step back. Nope, absolutely not. Jake, on the other hand, grinned. This is insane. Emma pushed the bookshelf open further, revealing a narrow staircase leading downward. A damp, musty smell drifted up, like air that had been trapped for decades. Jake pointed his flashlight inside, illuminating stone steps. Descending into darkness. A secret passage? Leo shook his head violently. Do you hear yourselves? A hidden staircase in a haunted house? This is exactly how horror movies start. Emma exhaled. Leo, we're already locked in. Our only way forward is through. Jake stepped onto the first stair, testing its stability. Looks solid. Emma turned to Leo, her expression firm. You can stay here if you want, but I'm not sitting around waiting for something else to happen, Leo groaned. I hate this. I really hate this. Still, when Emma and Jake started down the stairs, he hesitated only a moment before following. The deeper they descended, the colder it became. The passage walls were rough stone, damp with moisture, and the air smelled of earth and mildew. Their footsteps echoed, making it feel like they weren't alone. At the bottom, the passage opened into a small underground chamber. Shelves lined the walls, filled with old crates and glass bottles. In the center of the room stood an old wooden desk, its surface covered in scattered papers. Emma shivered. What is this place? Jake picked up one of the papers, his eyes scanning the faded ink. Looks like letters, but they're unfinished. Emma moved closer, her flashlight illuminating the words. If you are reading this, it means you have found the truth. We never left. We never escaped. The house, the writing cut off abruptly. The rest of the page was blank. Leo's voice was barely above a whisper. What does that mean? We never left? Emma looked at the other papers. Some were completely blank. Others had just a few desperate words scrawled across them. Help us. Trapped. The house is alive. A chill ran down her spine. Jake turned, pointing his flashlight at the far end of the room. There's something else here. Against the back wall, partially hidden behind a shelf, was an old wooden door. It looked heavier than the others, its surface carved with strange symbols. Emma hesitated. Should we open it? Leo grabbed her arm. Are you insane? Did you read those letters? Jake was already stepping closer. What if this is where the family went? What if they're still here? Leo's face twisted in panic. Jake, we are not opening that door. But Jake wasn't listening. He reached out, gripping the handle. It was cold to the touch. He hesitated for just a second, then turned it. The lock clicked open. The door swung inward. A gust of icy air rushed out, sending chills over their skin. The flashlight beams barely penetrated the darkness beyond. Then, a whisper, soft, faint, coming from inside. Emma's breath caught. Did you hear that? Leo was shaking. We need to go, right now. Jake, frozen in place, whispered back. Hello? For a moment, there was nothing, just silence. Then a voice. Why did you come here? The door slammed shut. The sound of the slamming door echoed through the underground chamber, rattling the old shells and sending dust swirling in the cold air. Emma, Jake, and Leo stood frozen, their breath shallow, their bodies tense. Then, a whisper. Soft, distant, yet unmistakably real. You shouldn't have come. Leo stumbled backward, pressing himself against the damp stone wall. No, 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 I'm done. We're leaving. Emma's heart pounded against her ribs. Who's there? She called out, trying to keep her voice steady. Silence. Jake swallowed hard and stepped closer to the door, shining his flashlight over its rough wooden surface. That wasn't just in our heads, right? Leo let out a nervous laugh, his voice shaking. Oh yeah, because haunted voices are so normal. Emma ignored him, her mind racing. The whisper, was it trying to warn them, or was it something else? She reached out and placed her palm against the door. The wood was ice cold. There has to be more here, she murmured. Jake traced his fingers along the carved symbols, squinting. These markings, they don't look random. Leo threw up his hands. Oh sure, let's analyze the creepy haunted door. Because that's a great idea. But Jake wasn't listening. His fingers stopped at a circular indentation in the wood about the size of a coin. It looks like something fits here. Emma turned back to the metal box they had found in the library. Could it hold the missing piece? She opened it again, pushing aside the old letters and photograph, searching. And then her fingers brushed against something hard and cold. A small, round medallion. Its surface was smooth, except for an engraved symbol that matched the ones on the door. Emma held it up. I think this is it. Leo shook his head furiously. No, no way. We are not opening that door. Jake took the medallion from Emma, his expression unreadable. What if we have to? Leo stared at him like he had lost his mind. Have to? You heard the creepy voice. You saw the messages. The house is alive. Emma bit her lip. But what if the family is still here? What if they were trapped? Leo pointed a shaking finger at her. Then they can stay trapped and we can leave. Jake took a deep breath, then slowly pressed the medallion into the indentation. It fit perfectly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the symbols on the door glowed. A faint blue light pulsed through the carvings like veins coming to life. The air grew even colder, and the whispers returned, dozens of them, overlapping, urgent. Go back. It's too late. You don't understand. The door creaked. The latch unlatched itself. The wood trembled. Leo grabbed Emma's wrist. Emma, please. Emma hesitated, but then Jake pushed. The door swung open. A blast of icy wind rushed past them, snuffing out their flashlights for a split second. When they flicked them back on, the beams illuminated a long, dark tunnel stretching beyond the doorway. At the end of the passage stood a single figure. A woman, pale, dressed in an old-fashioned gown, her dark hair falling over her shoulders, her eyes, hollow and sunken, locked onto theirs. Leo choked on a breath. Oh my God. The woman took a step forward. Emma's blood turned to ice. Then, the whispers exploded into a deafening chorus. Run! The figure lunged. Jake grabbed Emma's hand. Go! Leo didn't need to be told twice. He bolted up the stairs, taking them two at a time. Emma and Jake were right behind him, the sound of rushing footsteps echoing behind them. Something was following them. Emma risked a glance back. The woman was closer, not running, not walking. Just there, moving impossibly fast. Leo reached the top of the staircase first, slamming into the library doors. It's still locked. Jake and Emma crashed into him as he pulled at the handles. The whispers grew louder. The woman was almost upon them. Then, a loud bang. The doors burst open. The three of them tumbled forward, landing hard on the library floor. The room was silent. Emma's hands were shaking as she scrambled to her feet, spinning toward the staircase. The hidden passage was gone. The bookshelf was back in place, as if it had never moved. Jake staggered up, gasping for breath. What just happened? Leo pressed himself against the far wall, his face pale. That was not human. Emma's hands clenched into fists. No. She looked at the metal box, the old letters, the faded photograph. The whispers hadn't been trying to hurt them. They had been warning them. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead. We need to find out who that woman was. Leo let out a hollow laugh. Or, are we leave and never come back? Emma shook her head. Something happened in this house. Something horrible. And I think we're the only ones who can figure it out. Jake exhaled. Then we start with the family. Emma nodded. We start with the past. Leo groaned, dragging a hand down his face. I really hate this plan." But deep down, they all knew the mystery of Green Manor was only just beginning. The hours that followed felt like a blur. The oppressive silence in the library was stifling, the walls seemingly closing in as the three of them tried to process everything that had happened. Emma paced back and forth, her mind racing with questions. The woman in the tunnel, the whispering voices, the strange symbols, the clues were all pointing in one direction. But what did they mean? Jake sat at the table, examining the old photograph once more. "We have to find out more about this family." Leo paced nervously. "And how exactly do you propose we do that?" "The house is literally trying to kill us." Emma ignored Leo's complaints, her attention fixed on the photograph. The family in the picture had seemed so happy, so carefree. But now, with everything that had happened, she couldn't shake the feeling that their smiles hid something darker. "Wait." Emma stopped in her tracks, her gaze narrowing at the photo. "The woman. The one we saw." Jake looked up. "What about her?" Emma pointed to the photograph, the woman in the tunnel. "She looks like her." Jake and Leo moved closer, both staring at the photograph. The woman in the picture had the same dark hair, the same haunting eyes. But there was something else, a look of uncertainty, a sadness that hadn't been there when the photo was taken. "This is her," Emma said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is the woman we saw." Leo swallowed hard. "So, she's the one who disappeared?" Emma nodded. "I think so. I think this is the family that lived here. And I think something happened to them, something that kept them here." Jake rubbed his temples. "But why now? Why are we seeing them? Why are we stuck in this house?" Emma turned back to the photograph. There was something about the date on the back, October 12, 1953. It stood out to her like a beacon, an anchor in the middle of everything strange and terrifying. "What if the date is the key?" she said suddenly. "What if it's the day something went wrong?" Leo raised an eyebrow. "You're not seriously suggesting that we celebrate the anniversary of whatever curse is on this house, are you?" Emma shot him a glare. "No, but I think we need to understand what happened on that day. Maybe it will help us figure out how to stop this." Jake leaned forward. "The journals. We've seen a few letters, but there has to be more, right? Maybe the family wrote something down before they disappeared." Emma stood up, determination in her eyes. "Let's go back to the attic. We missed something there. There has to be more evidence." The three of them left the library and made their way to the staircase leading up to the attic. With each step, the house seemed to grow quieter, as if holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The door to the attic creaked as they pushed it open, revealing the dark, cluttered space beyond. They walked cautiously into the attic, their flashlights scanning the boxes and crates scattered around. The room smelled musty, as though it hadn't been touched in years. Emma began to sift through the piles of old belongings, her eyes scanning for anything that might stand out. She opened a few boxes, finding old clothes, furniture, and personal items, nothing of interest. Then, in the far corner of the room, she noticed something strange. An old trunk tucked beneath a pile of blankets and forgotten furniture. Its wood was dark, the metal corners tarnished with age. "This is it," Emma said, rushing over to the trunk. Jake and Leo followed, standing back as she carefully opened it. Inside, there were more letters, some neatly folded, others hastily scribbled, and a large, dusty journal. Emma picked up the journal, her fingers trembling as she flipped it open. The handwriting was familiar, the same elegant script as the notes they had found earlier. She read aloud, October 12, 1953. "It has been 2 weeks since we last saw Margaret. The house is not the same. It whispers at night, and the walls seem to move. I fear we are being watched." Jake and Leo exchanged uneasy glances. Emma continued reading. "I've tried to leave, but the doors will not open. Margaret says I am being paranoid, but I am certain something is wrong. Something has changed in this house, and it is not letting us go." The next few pages were a blur of confusion, each entry growing more desperate, the writing shakier and more frantic. "They are here. I saw them last night, 2 figures standing at the foot of my bed. I do not know who they are, but they have been in the house for as long as I can remember. They have taken Margaret. I can feel their eyes on me." Emma paused, her voice faltering. "Margaret? That must be the woman we saw." Jake leaned closer, studying the journal. "But who are the others? What happened to them?" Emma turned the page. The final entry was brief, almost a plea. "I cannot stay here any longer. I will leave tonight or die trying. If anyone finds this, know that the house has claimed us. The past is lost and the future belongs to it." The ink was smeared in places, as though the writer had been in a hurry to finish. The entry was dated October 13, 1953, the day after they disappeared. Emma's breath caught in her throat. "They tried to escape, but they didn't make it." Jake's voice was quiet. "So the house doesn't just trap people, it keeps them." Leo shook his head, disbelief written across his face. "You mean we're stuck here too?" Emma glanced at the journal, the photograph, and the letters. The past had caught up with them, but it didn't have to be their future. "We have to end this," she said, her voice steady but firm. "We have to break the cycle before it's too late." They stood in the attic, staring at the journal, the whispers in the air growing louder, as if the house itself was listening to their words. The truth was clear now, but the question remained: could they find a way out, or were they destined to be part of Green Manor's dark history? The wind howled outside, pressing against the windows of the attic as Emma, Jake, and Leo stood in a tense silence, the journal clutched tightly in Emma's hands. The whispers from the house grew louder, as though the walls themselves were alive, urging them to leave, to give up. But they couldn't, not after everything they had learned. Emma took a deep breath. We have to break the cycle. We can't let what happened to the family happen to us. Jake, still visibly shaken, but resolute, nodded. But how? We don't even know who the people are or what they want. Leo paced restlessly, his eyes darting around the attic. We've already tried to leave, but every time we think we're out, we're pulled back in. Something about this house is keeping us here. Emma opened the journal again, scanning the final entry. The words burned in her mind as though they were imprinted in her thoughts. The house has claimed us. The past is lost, and the future belongs to it. Wait, Emma said suddenly, her finger landing on a previously overlooked detail. The past is lost. The future belongs to it. It's not just about the house, it's about the time. Something changed that day, the day Margaret disappeared. We have to find the moment the house started feeding on their souls. Jake leaned in. How do we do that? Emma's eyes were wide, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The house didn't trap them by accident. They were drawn in. The house wanted them. And it's still doing it. Wait. Leo stopped pacing and turned to Emma. What if we can use their memories, their history, against it? What if we change the narrative? Emma's heart skipped a beat. Exactly. We need to give the house something it can't take. We have to rewrite the ending. Jake's face turned pale. And how do we do that? It's a house, not a book. Emma smiled grimly. Maybe, but the house has memories. The house remembers. If we can find the key to what it wants, what it's been, feeding ennui can take it away. For a moment, there was silence as they processed the idea. Then Leo looked around, his eyes landing on the dusty floor beneath their feet. What if the house is built on the pain of its past? What if its foundation is what it feeds on? Emma's eyes widened. You're right. The house isn't just an old structure. It's a memory, a living record of everything it's trapped within its walls. The house's foundation, if they could reach it, understand it, they might be able to undo what had been done. But there was still one piece missing, the woman. She's still out there, Emma said softly. Margaret, I think she's been trying to warn us. We need to find her, Jake said firmly. We have to bring her back. She's part of this. Leo shook his head in disbelief. And how exactly do you suggest we find her in this nightmare of a house? Emma hesitated for a moment before answering. We don't find her, she finds us. They turned toward the attic door. The whispers had stopped for a moment, but the tension in the air was palpable. They descended the stairs slowly, each step heavy with the weight of what was at stake. The house seemed to watch them, its eerie silence punctuated only by the creaks and groans of the old structure. They reached the main hall, but before they could move further, a cold gust of air slammed against the door at the end of the hallway. It swung open, revealing the dark tunnel from earlier, the one that had led them to. Margaret, she's here, Emma whispered. Without another word, they moved forward. They stepped into the tunnel, the walls stretching endlessly ahead, the shadows deeper, darker. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. Emma could feel the house's presence pressing in on them, a living thing, alive with secrets. And then, a figure, Margaret. She stood at the end of the tunnel, her expression distant, as though she had been waiting for them. Her eyes locked with Emma's. "You've come," she whispered, her voice faint, fragile. "We have to end this," Emma said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We need to know how to break the cycle, Margaret. The house, it's alive. It keeps feeding on people. What happened to you? What do we have to do?" Margaret's face softened, the sadness in her eyes deepening. "It feeds on lost souls," she said, her voice trembling. "It keeps us here, in this place, because we can't move on. It twists everything. Every regret, every mistake, it holds them. It holds us." Emma's chest tightened. "But how do we let go? How do we make it stop?" Margaret took a shaky step forward, her form flickering like a fading light. "You must take my place. You must release me. The house will let you go, but only if you break the bond. You can't hold on to the past." Jake stepped forward, his voice rough. "We don't want to replace you. We don't want to be stuck here forever." Margaret's expression softened, a ghost of a smile flickering across her lips. "Then you must forgive. You must let go of everything, all of it. The memories, the fear, the pain." The air around them seemed to shift, a tension building, as though the house was holding its breath. Emma stepped forward. "I understand. We're ready. We'll let go for you." Margaret nodded, her form growing fainter. "Then go. You can leave. You will be free." A bright light flooded the tunnel, washing over them in a rush of warmth. The whispers had stopped. The house, once alive with malevolent energy, seemed to breathe out a sigh of relief. When the light dimmed, Margaret was gone. The tunnel was silent. Emma, Jake, and Leo stood in the now empty hallway, their hearts pounding. Then, slowly, the door that had been shut for so long opened. They stepped through. The house was silent. As they emerged into the fresh night air, the moonlight washed over them. The weight of Green Manor, the oppressive, suffocating presence that had once held them. Captive was gone. They were free. Weeks later, they stood at the gates of Green Manor one last time. The house, now abandoned, seemed just like any other old building, fading with time. The air was still, the memories fading like a distant dream. "I can't believe it's over," Jake said quietly. Emma smiled softly, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "It's over, but it will never truly leave us. What we learned here, what we faced, it will stay with us forever." Leo chuckled softly. "Well, at least we're out. No more creepy whispers." Emma turned to him with a teasing grin. "You're not going to miss those?" Leo raised an eyebrow. "Are you kidding?" "I'll take peace and quiet any day." Jake put an arm around Emma's shoulders. "We made it. And that's what matters." They walked away from the gates of Green Manor, their footsteps echoing in the night. The mystery was solved, The curse was broken, and they were free